July 20, 1944. A German officer enters Hitler's secret military headquarters, known as the Wolf's Lair. He sets down a briefcase loaded with explosives and walks out. Moments later, it detonates. The room is torn apart. 4 people die, but not Hitler. The table legs absorb the blast, and Adolf Hitler walks away, wounded, but alive. But what if he didn't? What if the Valkyrie plot had succeeded, and Hitler had died that day? What happens to World War II when the man who started it is suddenly gone? This is the lost chapter. By 1944, Germany was losing the war. The Allies had landed in Normandy. The Soviets were crushing the German army on the Eastern Front, and inside Germany, morale was collapsing. A secret group of military officers, government officials, and aristocrats had reached their breaking point. They believed Hitler was leading Germany toward total destruction, and that removing him was the only way to save what remained. At the center of this resistance was Colonel Claus von Stauffenberg. A decorated officer and father of 4, Stauffenberg had grown disillusioned with the Nazi regime after witnessing atrocities on the Eastern Front. He decided that only one option remained: kill Hitler. Operation Valkyrie already existed. It was an emergency plan to preserve order inside Germany in case of civil unrest. But Stauffenberg and his allies secretly rewrote it. If Hitler died, they would use Valkyrie to activate the reserve army, arrest SS commanders, seize control of Berlin, and cut off Nazi leadership from the chain of command. It was one of the boldest conspiracies in modern history, and it very nearly succeeded. On the morning of July 20th, 1944, Stauffenberg flew to Hitler's headquarters in East Prussia, known as the Wolf's Lair. He had smuggled in a time-delayed explosive hidden inside a briefcase. During the briefing, Hitler stood near a heavy oak conference table. Stauffenberg placed the bomb under the table, just a few feet from Hitler, and excused himself to take a phone call. As he left the building, the bomb exploded. The blast was powerful. Windows shattered, walls cracked, and 4 men were killed instantly. But Hitler survived. One of the officers had unknowingly moved the briefcase slightly behind the thick wooden leg of the table, deflecting the full force of the explosion away from Hitler. Stauffenberg, believing the explosion had killed the dictator, flew back to Berlin to initiate the next phase. But as reports came in that Hitler was still alive, the plan unraveled. Key officers hesitated. The SS responded swiftly. The window of opportunity slammed shut. Stauffenberg and his closest allies were arrested that same night. They were executed by firing squad in the courtyard of the War Ministry, without trial. But let's rewind. What if the table hadn't blocked the blast? What if Hitler had died instantly? The coup would have begun within the hour. Operation Valkyrie would be activated. Under the pretext of a military emergency, thousands of reserve army troops would be mobilized, believing they were defending the government against an SS uprising. The conspirators had already drafted arrest orders for top Nazi officials: Heinrich Himmler, Joseph Goebbels, Hermann Göring. SS offices across Germany would be stormed, communication centers seized, propaganda outlets shut down. Radio broadcasts would announce Hitler's death and declare the formation of a new provisional government, one not loyal to the Nazi Party. Of course, not all would go quietly. It's likely some high-ranking Nazis would resist, triggering a brief but bloody power struggle in Berlin. But with Hitler dead, the psychological hold he had over the German people and military would be shattered. Many would have surrendered without a fight. With Hitler gone and a new leadership in place, Germany might have tried to negotiate peace, at least with the Western Allies. Stauffenberg's vision was clear. He wanted to preserve what was left of Germany, end the war, and prevent Soviet occupation. He believed that Churchill and Roosevelt might accept a conditional peace to prevent further bloodshed, but it wouldn't have been easy. At the Tehran conference, the Allies had already agreed on one thing: Germany must surrender unconditionally. Churchill might have been persuaded to change course, but Churchill fixes his cigar, asks only 2 questions. Who rules Berlin now? Can they still fight? Washington, D.C. Roosevelt assembles his Joint Chiefs. Fingers trace convoy lines across a North Atlantic map. If Germany quits, he muses, Tokyo fights alone. Lend-Lease planners draft a redirect, 20% of Europe-bound artillery shells to switch for the Pacific. By Christmas, Moscow. Stalin's NKVD intercepts garbled Wehrmacht signals. Stauffenberg, Fuhrer dead, state of emergency. Within the hour, Zhukov receives a one-line order: advance the Vistula offensive 72 hours. No pause. For the Red Army, a leaderless Berlin is a sprint, not a negotiation. Allied capitals aren't celebrating, they're recalculating. Every hour without Hitler. But Stalin? Highly unlikely. The Soviet Union had lost more than 20 million people in the war. Stalin would not stop until Berlin was in ruins and Nazi Germany utterly crushed. In a best-case scenario, the war in the West might have ended early, while the Eastern Front dragged on. In a worst-case scenario, the coup triggers a civil war inside Germany, pitting Wehrmacht loyalists against hardcore SS remnants. Either way, the course of history would be dramatically altered. But one of the most haunting questions is this: how many lives could have been saved? By July 1944, the Holocaust was still underway. Millions had already perished, but many more, especially in Hungary and Poland, were still being deported and executed. Had Hitler died, it's likely that the new government would have halted the final solution. SS infrastructure could have been dismantled. Concentration camps possibly liberated sooner. Cities like Dresden, Cologne, and Berlin might have avoided total destruction. Tens of thousands of German, British, American, and Soviet soldiers might have returned home alive. Millions of civilians across Europe might have been spared. Operation Valkyrie failed, but it proved something powerful. Even inside one of the most brutal regimes in history, resistance was possible. Claus von Stauffenberg and hundreds of others risked everything. They weren't saints. Some were conservative nationalists, but they chose to stand against tyranny, knowing the cost. Stauffenberg's last words before execution were simple: "Long live sacred Germany." They were the words of a man who believed that patriotism meant resisting evil, even when it came from within. Today, he and the other conspirators are remembered as heroes in Germany. Their failed plan remains one of the greatest what-ifs in modern history, a moment when history nearly changed, but didn't. This was the lost chapter. If you believe history is more than names and dates, if you believe stories matter, then join us. Like, subscribe, share, and never miss the chapters they tried to erase.